Welcome to Advocis Coffee Talks. Please note that all attendee mics are muted and video is off to ensure that there are no technical difficulties. Your webinar will begin in 2 minutes. Thank you for joining Advocis Coffee Talks, espresso-sized webinars for Advocis members. I'm your host, Sheila Godsey, National Manager of Member Engagement at Advocis National. And helping in the background is Schjott, Member Engagement Associate at Advocis National. If you've just joined, please note that all attendee mics are muted and video is off to ensure that there are no technical difficulties. If you have questions during the presentation, please hover your mouse on your screen and you will see a Q&A button where you can type your questions throughout the webinar, and we will make sure that all questions are answered before the end of this session. If you're joining us by phone, please email events@advocis.ca and tell us the phone number you joined from, first and last name, and Advocis ID. Our Zoom attendance report tells us how long each of you are on the webinar or call, and in order to receive CE credit, you must attend for the entire webinar. Today, we will hear from Schjott of RBC Insurance. Have you ever wondered whether you're giving enough feedback to your team? Jonathan is going to share his tips and insights on how to hone the art of giving feedback. Advocis is your professional association, and I want to take a moment to thank our partner association, Gamma International Canada, for helping Advocis continue to build a strong community of financial advisors across Canada. But first, I want to start off with a poll. I'm going to bring up a question and ask you to choose the answer that suits you. It's anonymous and no one can see who answered, including me. And here's the question. On a scale of 1 to 5, how satisfied are you with the amount of feedback you get from your manager or client or from staff? So I'll give you a few more seconds to register your answers. And don't worry, it's anonymous. but it looks like we're getting close to everyone, and we'll share the results. And here's the results. So it looks like we have a tie between most people being somewhat satisfied, and that's 35%, and 35% are satisfied. And there's 7% who are not satisfied. There's 13% who are more than satisfied, and 9% who are extremely satisfied. Okay, so that's great to see because it means that there is some room for improvement. So let me introduce you to today's speaker. We are going to hear from Jonathan Schjott, who is the Regional Vice President of Insurance Brokerage at RBC Insurance. He holds his CLU, CFP, and CHS, and Jonathan is a proud member of Advocis, and he is the Vice President of the Gamma Canada Board of Directors. Take it away, Jonathan.
Perfect. Thanks, Sheila. Have you ever been working with someone as a boss, a manager, or even as a colleague and seen an opportunity for them to become more effective? And then just didn't tell them? Probably, right? We're all armchair quarterbacks from time to time. Now, if you wanted to tell them, if you wanted to share that feedback, have you ever struggled to find the right words to share that feedback in a constructive manner? Or have you ever held back on getting that feedback because you were worried that they would get defensive? You're worried that they would react poorly. If you ever answered yes to those questions, well, this session is for you. So today I'm going to share a model on how to share feedback in a way that brings the best in the people around you. And while today's session was designed for sales leaders, its principles can be applied in virtually any kind of coaching environment. Maybe with staff, maybe with an associate advisor you work with. You can use it to coach your clients. Heck, I've got a 2-year-old and it sometimes works with coaching him. So what you'll see over the next 15 or 20 minutes is that performance communication rooted in feedback is one of the best ways to accelerate the growth of the people around you. Now, over the years, I've come to think about feedback as a process or a formula of sorts. And it starts with a maniacal focus on building skill. Think about the last time you tried something new. Were you able to generate superior results right away? Probably not, right? You first need to begin building skill to get good at anything. And this is the key to our formula, because skill is the route to increase confidence. And when we're more confident at things, we're more likely to do them. And that's when results start to happen. Heck, I more or less gave up golf because of lack of skill. Now think about, if you're a sales leader, think about your advisors, or think about people that you coach. It's only natural that they're going to avoid doing things that they're not good at, where they lack skill. And this is the perfect opportunity for us to use coaching and feedback to build them up. But it's not easy, is it? If it were, everyone you coach would be a superstar. But they're not. There are always obstacles. But I firmly believe that almost everyone has room to learn more and do more than they're currently learning and doing. Now, when coaching, as a coach, we get in our own way sometimes, don't we? Now, time and time again in my coaching, I've seen 3 kind of myths or areas that get in the way of us generating really great results. So I'm going to unpack them for you here today. So the first is, the way to empower people is to leave them alone and let them manage themselves. Now, it may seem weird or obvious to have this up here, but I see it time and time again. The reality, however, is that almost everyone performs better with more direction, more support, and more guidance from their manager or leader. So why do we as managers sometimes second guess ourselves? Well, what I've seen is we've kind of been conditioned to fear being known as a micromanager and swung so far the other way that we've created an under-management epidemic. The truth is that a lot of managers just simply don't possess the skill or the confidence in our own coaching skill to effectively correct the person we're expected to coach. If we did, we would. But the reality is that without your guidance, okay, the people you coach are doomed to keep making the same mistakes over and over again. People look to you to feel supported. Trust me, we usually know when something isn't right, but often don't know how to fix it. But leaving someone alone says to them that you're not there for them, period. But when you help them take corrective action and improve their skill through coaching and through feedback, okay, that's not micromanagement, that's management. Now, the second myth is that periodic performance reviews are enough to keep your people on track. Okay? If you're like most managers, sometimes you don't talk to your advisors about performance. You might talk about results or outcomes, or maybe even about their activities, but not so much about performance. It's a concept that's much broader. You may be in the mindset that they know how they're doing, or if there's trouble, they'll come to you, or why would you need to praise them if they're just doing their job? And this is a bit of a missed opportunity. Think about the best sports coach you had as a child, or think about high performance athletes who rely on their coaches to let them know the very instant there's an opportunity for them to do something more effectively. And the third bias that I find gets in our way is our own experience bias. A lot of people in management or leadership roles were chosen for that role for a lot of different reasons, but not always because they're especially good at managing people, often because they were great individual contributors. And that experience bias gets in the way of seeing the world through the eyes of the person you're coaching. Okay? Because one of the most critical things that we do is communicating with our people about their performance. Now, to be fair, you've probably tried talking to your people about their performance, but it's difficult sometimes, isn't it? Particularly when you have to point out a mistake. Maybe you tried to talk to them about what had happened, and sometimes people get upset or defensive. Or perhaps you didn't have the right word, so it became an awkward exchange and maybe chilled your relationship for a week or two. Or worse, had the opposite effect and dampened their performance rather than enhance it. If this sounds familiar, don't despair. You may have been doing it wrong. I was, and so were a lot of the managers that I've worked with. What I'm talking about is providing performance feedback, right? Good old-fashioned feedback, which isn't inherently difficult to give or to receive, but when you do it wrong, it feels really wrong to the person you're giving it to. So if you've been through some of these awkward situations before, please let yourself off the hook and have an open mind. I did it wrong for years. Sometimes I still do, but communicating about performance is part of our job. So let's unpack this for a sec. What is the purpose of delivering feedback? The way I see it, it kind of falls into two buckets. One is to reinforce positive behaviors, and the other is to correct negative behaviors. So why is it so scary? Why do the people you're coaching sometimes get their backs up when you offer to give them feedback? What I see often is that poor experiences in the past have tainted this for both parties. So today I'm going to introduce you to a feedback model that works. Because here's the difference that feedback can make in your office, in your agency. 82% of employees appreciate both positive and negative feedback. Okay? And while most people believe that feedback is valuable, only about 30% receive feedback. And even fewer than that receive it regularly enough to drive meaningful change. Yet almost everyone agrees that it's effective at improving performance. So let me ask you a question. If delivered professionally and respectfully, would you want more feedback from your boss, your manager, your leader on how to do your job more effectively? Most of us, right? Who wouldn't want to become better at what they do? So let's start with some feedback basics. First, when giving feedback, you want to focus on the behavior. You have a bad attitude or you did that wrong is not feedback. That's the kind of communication that gets people's back up and gets defensive. Don't focus on the mistake. People will get defensive when you focus on their mistake. The mistake's in the past. It can't be changed. And people feel trapped when you catch them like that. So focus on the behavior that caused the mistake in the first place and how to be more effective in the future, which is the key to our third piece here. Focus on something that you can do something about. And finally, give it frequently, especially positive feedback. So here's how to give feedback in 4 easy steps. First is to ask. Second is describe what you see. Third is describe the impact of what you see. And fourth is to encourage effective change. So let's take a closer look at each one of these steps. So the first step is to ask. So you might be asking yourself, why would I ask before giving someone feedback? I mean, you're the boss, aren't you? Well, we ask first because the person you're giving feedback to should be in the right frame of mind to receive that feedback. Asking for permission increases their appreciation and their attention during that feedback, and that increases the likelihood that they're going to change their behavior. So some examples of what that sounds like is quite simply, hey, Jim, can I give you some feedback? Sally, can I share an observation? The second step is to describe your observation. So positive or negative, it sounds like when you arrive early, when you stay late to make calls. So starting off with when you have framed the comment in the right way. Now, if you're giving negative feedback, don't sugarcoat it. Would you prefer to be involved in a 15-second negative feedback discussion or an awkward 2-minute feedback discussion? I think the answer is pretty obvious. Our third step is to describe the impact of what you see. Okay? So when you're first starting out, deliberately say, here's what happens. It'll help you focus the right words to communicate. So here's what happens. I can focus on other areas that need my attention. Here's what happens. The client calls to thank me. And our fourth step is to encourage effective change. Remember, you can't change the past. So it should sound like, could you change that? Could you do that differently? How can you do that differently? By asking them to change or how they can change, it creates dialogue, and it also increases the chances that the change is going to stick. And if you're giving positive feedback, a keep it up, thank you, or well done goes a long way. And don't just tell them what to do. The whole point of feedback is to unlock someone's ability to develop themselves. So here's an example of what it sounds like in practice when you put it all together. So it might be, hey Frank, can I give you some feedback? Okay. When you're ahead of schedule on your licensing studies, it gives me even more confidence that you'll be wildly successful in this career. Keep it up. So this is an example when you're coaching a candidate coming into the business. So, and it ends up looking exactly like you see on the screen. So you might be thinking, you know, my boss, my manager never talks to me about the small things like this. The feedback I usually get is negative. It feels like a big deal, and it feels like I'm getting into trouble. And often you're right. And this is what we're trying to change. With negative feedback only, it usually happens with such scarce frequency that you don't really get good at delivering it. So naturally, the person you're coaching gets their back up, and unfortunately, most of the time, you both end up feeling awful. So other examples of what this might sound like across other parts of the industry would be, hey, Jim, can I share an observation? When you listen patiently to your prospect without interrupting, it shows great respect for the relationship. Keep it up. Sarah, can I share an observation? When you stay on the budget that we put together, it shows me how committed you are to hitting your financial goals, and it makes you a pleasure to work with. Thank you. Hey, Sean, can I share some feedback? When you roll your eyes after the client asks you to explain the concept a third time, it shows contempt, and the client notices your frustration. What do you think you can do differently? So here's some general notes on feedback. In practice, it should be quick. You can deliver it in 5 to 15 seconds. It's quick, it's easy, and your advisors warm up to it quickly. Okay. When should you give it? Well, immediate feedback is ideal, but if you have to wait 30 minutes or even 3 hours, no big deal. Okay. You should give it frequently when you can. So as often as you observe something worth giving feedback for. And it's always easier to identify negative behaviors, identify things people in your mind are doing wrong. But I encourage you to look for the positive so we don't find ourselves undermining performance and always pointing out the negative. Now, you may be asking yourself, will this work? Well, I've seen it work, and I've seen how communicating in this way transforms performance and enhances the professional relationship you have with the people around you. And there are stats to back this up. In over 90% of instances of negative feedback, it worked at correcting the behavior the first time. So that's why it's not necessary to make a big deal out of feedback and make a big deal out of sharing your observations. Certainly not necessary to do a root cause analysis. If the person you're giving feedback to changes their behavior as a result of the feedback, isn't that what matters? Okay. So here's my challenge to you. Okay. I call it the feedback challenge. It's like the ice bucket challenge, but not as cold or as wet. So my challenge is to give feedback to the people you coach once daily. Not praise, I'm not talking about high fives or even virtual high fives. You must help the people you coach understand the impact of their behaviors. Try giving only positive feedback for 6 weeks, especially if you're used to mostly giving negative feedback. This will help the people you coach feel recognized for the work they're doing, and it'll help warm them up to the new way of communicating about their performance. At the end of 6 weeks, they'll have received kind of 20 to 30 instances of positive feedback, each of them reinforcing something great that they're doing. So at the end of a 6-week period, start introducing negative feedback, but stay as positive as you can. If 80% of what the person you're coaching is doing is great, then 80% of the feedback you give them should be positive. The positive feedback has a transformative ability to both the person's performance and also the great relationship that you're building. So think about how often you beat yourself up in a given day. Should have said this, could have done that. The piece of feedback can very well be the highlight of that person's day. Now, today I've shared a lot of detailed and actionable guidance. And I've shared it because I know that it works. But in all this detail, I hope that we don't miss what the engine of building others is. You gotta love building others and helping them succeed. Okay? But what I mean, of course, is professional love, but it means doing the things that help the people around you grow every single day as a way of showing respect for them. You could be demanding while showing love and respect for the people around you. You don't have to withhold positive feedback, and you can be caring and respectful when you give negative feedback. You can deliver tough messages with kindness. You don't have to be mean, short, disrespectful, or rude to challenge and get the most out of the people around you. You certainly don't need to act like a boss. Being direct and being kind doing it takes a level of love. So be the leader that considers this a sacred responsibility and recognize that you have a greater impact in the lives of the people around you than you sometimes realize. So choose to lead in this way. So thank you very much. Back to you, Sheila.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. That was a fantastic presentation, and I really loved your examples of how you can get the best out of someone. And I love the phrase, how can that be better? That's one of my favorite phrases. So appreciate that. Now we are going to get to our Q&A with Jonathan. But before we do that, let's get to our last poll question. So here's the question. Are you prepared to take the feedback challenge? All of you just heard from Jonathan of what the feedback challenge is. So the answers are absolutely, great idea, maybe if I have the time, or probably not. And then it might be does not apply. Maybe you don't have a manager or staff or clients that you want to do this with, so it does not apply. So we'll just give it a couple more seconds to let more people vote, and then we will share the results. It looks like, yeah, let's share the results. It's absolutely a great idea. Yeah, this is a great idea to spend the next 6 weeks being positive and then start introducing some negative feedback. It's a great idea, Jonathan. And now we're going to get to our Q&A. Oops, there we go. And the first question that we have here, Jonathan, is I find it difficult to provide feedback in a virtual environment. Good question. How do I address that?
Yeah, that's a tough one. And you know what, at the beginning of the pandemic, that was my number one fear, is not having as many opportunities to see my team and coach them directly. And I think for everyone, it's caused us to, at a necessity, shift our priorities. So what I would suggest in a situation like that is, as much as possible, you want to either maintain or increase the amount of just general communication that you have with your team. And in a virtual environment, you often just need to pay attention a lot more and look for those behaviors, look for what's happening in someone's business, for example, as a way to uncover some areas that you can provide some feedback. It's not always obvious because it's not right in front of you. Your colleague or the person you're coaching isn't right next to you or down the hall. But I think if we train ourselves to pay that much more attention, a lot of those opportunities of growth are going to present themselves.
Thank you. That's a fantastic way to handle that situation as we're all pivoting to more virtual meetings. The next question I have is, I give the same feedback many times over to my advisor, but they don't change. What should I do?
That's a good one, and certainly not an easy one. The reality is, most of the time when you give feedback, it's going to prompt change. But once you've given the same feedback kind of 5, 6, 7 times, then it begins to present itself as a systemic issue. And that's where I would shift from that, casual piece of feedback to a distinct coaching session, where you can share with your direct report or the person you're coaching, say, I've shared this feedback with you 7, 8 times. And I've shared it because I know it'll help you become more effective. But what I haven't seen is you adopt that feedback. Help me understand why. And let's explore together different ways that maybe you can make that change. The reality is that, not everyone responds to the same kind of coaching. So while just sharing that feedback works a lot of the time, the first time, it won't work for everyone. But I think it's important to still, sit down and have a meaningful discussion, collaborate with the person you're coaching to build a plan that works for them and one that they can commit to and that you can hold them accountable to.
Absolutely. It does take time. Okay, so we have another question here. Where the situation is bad, does silence work better than negative feedback? Good question.
It's a good, I guess that's a tough one. It's, I think a lot of it probably depends on the nature of the relationship. Certainly if you're in a manager role, there is an element of role power that comes with that. And certainly you don't want to abuse that role power, but if the situation is bad, I'm always a firm believer in, let's get everything on the table and let's communicate, because, silence, it just ends up festering and creating resentment. Often you can't always get over those bad feelings, but I think that most of the time we're professionals, and we can at least agree to disagree and move forward in the most constructive manner possible. But the long and short of it is, I would say communication usually trumps silence.
Okay, and in the interest of time, we're just going to take one last question here. Do you have any resources? Oh no, we have a couple more questions. Do you have any resources to help ask for feedback, maybe polls or surveys, etc.?
Sure. So it's a good question. So I've used SurveyMonkey for years, where just as part of sort of my process in my role is typically, a couple times a year, I'll reach out to my team and ask them to give some feedback to me. So, some of the things that I want to know is what am I doing well? What can I maybe be more effective at? What are some of the things that my team wishes that I knew about them, about their role, about their day-to-day. So don't underestimate the power of surveys as a way of gaining feedback. And I don't know if we have enough time on this call, but a few of the books I recommend on the subject, if you're looking to improve your skill set and asking the right questions, I say The Effective Manager by Mark Hortzman and Quiet Leadership by David Rock would be probably my top 2.
Quiet Leadership, okay. By David Rock, is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So we have a couple more questions. So I think this one is along the same lines as what you were talking before. They asked, if someone repeatedly is doing something wrong, how do you approach this without being negative?
It's tough to not go to the negatives. But I think it just takes sometimes a bit of planning ahead of that discussion, and be deliberate and think about how you want to frame the discussion in a way that is positive, that has the right outcome in mind. Oftentimes in those kinds of situations, the outcome you're looking for, that end result, is the same for both parties. You just might have different ways of getting there. To some level, if I'm trying to help someone achieve a result or improve a skill, I don't care necessarily exactly how they get there, as long as there is a plan in place that they're willing to commit to, and that we can follow up on a regular basis.
Okay, and here's the last question, and it's about Gamma. So how does Gamma benefit managers or leaders in our industry?
I might defer that one to my buddy Pete Gillespie, who's going to talk a little bit about Gamma at the conclusion of this call.
Beautiful segue. That's perfect, Jonathan. We'll do that. And I want to thank you so much for sharing your best practices on how to provide feedback for great results. Thanks, Jonathan.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And today's Coffee Talk was sponsored by our partner association, and I'd like to introduce Peter Gillespie, who is the past president of Gamma International, and he can tell us more about the organization and what they do and how they can benefit our leaders in our industry. Welcome, Peter.
Thank you, Sheila. Hello, everyone. We're pleased to be the sponsor of today's Coffee Talk, and we're so grateful to Jonathan for sharing a thought leadership on such an impactful topic as feedback. And so a few moments on Gamma International Canada. We are a professional association that exists exclusively for our Canadian leaders in a distribution of financial services. Our overall mission incorporates 4 key points. That's to offer world-class education and training resources to our members, to provide our members opportunities to build relationships with like-minded professionals. We also want to recognize our members for doing a hard job well and achieving standards of excellence. And we're here to promote growth through industry leadership opportunities, much like Jonathan has on the board of Gamma Canada. So you may be curious who can join Gamma Canada. Really, if you're in a leadership role within the Canadian financial service industry and your role involves one of the following key concepts, please consider membership in Gamma Canada. If you're involved day-to-day with coaching and leadership, or in business development, which can include marketing, practice management, compliance, and technology. If you help people with training and education, and or if you're involved with recruiting and selection, please consider joining Gamma Canada. So, to be a member of Gamma Canada, you first be a member of Advocis. The transition to a Gamma member is quite seamless. You'd reach out and you would join the manager category. And when you do become a Gamma Canada member, you retain all the rights and privileges of your Advocis membership, and you become a member of Gamma Canada, as well as an affiliate member of Gamma International. So for more information on Gamma Canada, you can visit us at gammacanada.com or reach out to Advocis or Advocis Member Services. Thanks again. Back to you, Sheila.
Peter, I have one more question.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to defer that question that was sent to Jonathan to you. So can you tell me, how does Gamma benefit managers and leaders in our country, in our financial services?
I'd say there's been 3 key memberships. I'm talking from my own bias. One is to get feedback from people outside your own organization, so you get some objective feedback. I'd say there's a generosity of idea sharing versus a scarcity. And so you're getting industry leading and data proven feedback for your various managing needs. And it also gives you opportunity to grow and challenge yourself and give back to your community. And it can actually make you a more effective advisor and a more effective member of your community, because it's giving you these tools that are time proven and allows you to do your job more effectively. And as Jonathan talked at the beginning, when you have more competence, you feel more confident.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Peter. Really appreciate you coming on today to talk about Gamma Canada. Now, if you're interested in today's topic, then watch for our follow-up email tomorrow that will include links to resources like creating a high-impact recruiting culture presentation or the Gamma LAMP Conference Live 2020, getting the most out of your development meetings with new advisors video. Now stay tuned for Coffee Talks on November 19th with Tony Bosch, Executive Vice President of Broker Development at Hub Financial. Tony's talk is titled Conservation Conversations, tongue twister. Thank you for joining Coffee Talks today. We will be sending you a follow-up email tomorrow that includes a recording of this session and the links I mentioned. If you joined us by phone, please email events@advocis.ca and let us know what number you joined from, first and last name, and Advocis ID. CE credits will be loaded into your online CE tracker through the Advocis website and should be there by early next week. For more information, please visit our website at www.advocis.ca. If you have more questions for Jonathan Schjott, please contact communications@advocis.ca. And if you want more information about coffee talks, please email events@advocis.ca. Thanks again. Have a safe and happy day.